Welcome to the 100th episode of Fireside Chats with Jesse. We are going in a little different direction this week. Typically, we interview people within the equipment finance industry. We are going outside the industry to interview a good friend of mine, Sherrif Lamb of Pinell County. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
My pleasure, Jesse. I feel privileged. This is a different vibe for a lot of your listeners.
Absolutely, and it's going to be a different kind of interview. As I mentioned before I hit record, I'm a little nervous, even though I shouldn't be, but you're on interviews all the time, so hopefully I don't embarrass myself too much today.
Oh, no, I've done them all. I've done every spectrum, so I'm sure you'll do great.
But, Mark, do you want to just kind of give a little background of yourself and what got you to your position that you're in today, if you don't mind, sir?
Yeah. Ironically, most people look at me and they probably think I've been a career cop, and that's actually not even close to the truth. I actually never thought about being a cop. I was a businessman. That's how you and I met. I owned a pest control business. But I had owned businesses for a long time, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And I was 33 years old when one of my neighbors had asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you want to do a ride along?" And I didn't, I'd given him a couple of excuses in the past, but I had no more excuses to give. I have no hair to wash, so I couldn't say I'm washing my hair. So I said, "Yeah, sure, let's go. Let's do it." And so I went out, and he worked on an Indian reservation right next to Mesa, Tempe, and Scottsdale, Arizona. If you've been to Arizona, it's where the Talking Stick Resort is. But I went on that ride along, and I remember one call was we went out, and there was a dad who had found a 20-year-old guy with his 14-year-old daughter. And the dad and the boy got into a scuffle, and then the kid ran out the back. Not a kid, a man ran out the back. We showed up. And if you've been on the reservation, there's a house, and there'll be like desert behind it. And every now and then you'll see some abandoned travel trailers or something. So I'm out there, and I'm armed with a flashlight and courage. That's it. And I'm out there looking, and I peek inside of this old abandoned travel trailer, and I see a whole pile of debris and clothes. And I'm like, man, I think I see some skin. I thought what I saw was a quarter size of skin under all of that stuff. And so I motion over to these guys. I'm like, "Hey, I think he's right here." And so they come over and they go in, and sure enough, boom, he was there. They drag him out of there. They tase him. They bring him out, put him on the ground, cuff him up. I was hooked. I went home that morning, and I told my wife, I woke her up and I said, "I'm going to be a cop." And 6 months later, I was in the academy for the same reservation. And that kicked off my law enforcement career. It was a complete change in direction for where I was in life and what I thought I'd be doing. And where I'm at now, I would have never have made it to this point. And I think it was an advantage to me because I came into law enforcement late in life. I had a lot of business experience. And so it really gave me a different perspective and approach to the job. And so I worked at like it was my own business. So I took every extra shift I could get. And I really just tried to build myself as a cop of what I wanted people to see me as, and how I wanted to be known. And so I worked really hard and was successful and had received some accolades. And I mean, that's a whole nother story how I got to be the sheriff, but that's how I got into law enforcement, and I became passionate about it. And really what I found was I always loved the rule of law. I always loved America and the Constitution. And I really understood the importance of the rule of law. And I found my place in this world by being part of it, protecting it, and being able to just give back to the community in a way.
No, and that makes sense. So when you went back to Janelle, your missus, and said, "Hey, I want to become a cop," she's like, "You're 33. The kids in the academy are like 10 years younger, probably even younger than that. Like, what are you thinking?"
She had been kind of prepped because ironically, I had actually about 2 or 3 years before that looked at going into the military at 30 years old. But I had 5 kids, and it just wasn't going to work. And so we just went on with life. And my wife, like I said, we had 5 kids. I was self-employed, no insurance. And so when I said that to my wife, my wife's looking at it like, "Yeah, let's do it." Insurance, steady paychecks, vacation pay, all things you don't tend to get when you're self-employed. And so for her, it was good. And, at the time I had a pigeon control business. I was pigeon proofing houses. And there was a couple times I'd almost fallen off some roofs and it was dangerous. And so my wife's like, trust me, police work is far less dangerous than what he was doing with pigeon control. And so she was good with it.
So then you upped your game from pigeons to bees, because that's how we met. Believe it or not, on a Sunday, like you had a bee issue and you came over and I met, I met you. So here you are, law and LEO, and then still working this on the weekends.
I've been it's all pest control, right? Pigeons, bees, bad people, they're all pests. And that's what we do, pest control. So I'm still in the same industry. I'm still per se in the same industry.
That's fair. That's fair. And then, the one thing I wanted to talk about today, or one of the things I want to talk about, was your personal brand and kind of how you've stuck true to that. And what's embarrassing is I thought I had one of your books. I know I had one at one point, but I can't find it. The only book that Brooke just gave me was your wife's book. So for those watching this, Mark's wife, Janelle, go check her out. And I think you have a copy of your book there, American Sheriff, Traditional Values for a Modern World. For those people who haven't read the book, it's I would say, what does it take? It's maybe a week read, but it kind of goes into Mark's. It goes into Mark's background and where he was from, but at the end of the day, it's your brand, and you've always stuck to that brand and where it's gotten you. So that's what I kind of wanted to pivot to, Mark, if you don't mind, where it was absolutely your beliefs and kind of where they've gotten you, sir.
And thanks for highlighting my wife's book. Hers is better than mine. It's called The Sheriff's Wife, Holding It All Together Behind the Scenes in Politics. I always joke and say it's an expose, but it's actually really good. She talks about what it's like being in politics. And then, of course, mine is The American Sheriff, Traditional Values in a Modern World. So I said I would save the other piece of how I became sheriff. When I was a cop, I saw a real lack of leadership in the profession. There were supervisors, but I noticed there was just a lack of real solid leaders, people who understood what it meant to take the agency or the brand or wherever you were to the next level. And I also didn't like the direction of the country at the time. And so 2011, I just said, you know what, instead of complaining about it, I want to be part of the solution. And so I decided to run for sheriff. And that took several years. I made some changes in the agencies that I worked for. I went to work at the sheriff's office. And then in 2015, I started my campaign. 2016, I ran. And then I won in 2016 and took office in 2017. But I brought a totally different mindset than what the police officers, the traditional cop was used to. See, the majority of the guys that are in leadership in law enforcement are career cops. They started when they were 18, 19 in a jail and maybe 21 as a police officer. And they've never really owned their own businesses for the most part. They've never really learned marketing. And they just go out and do their job, and they do a great job at it. But there's that whole other aspect. I thought there was a real void in this profession and a real opportunity to kind of rise to the top and really bring our agency to the top through branding. And so I went in right after we won, and I told my guys, look, we're going to do a few things different. We're going to create a brand for this agency. We want people to want to come to work here. We want people to want to come to live here. We want, when people see this patch, that they know exactly where it's at. And, this was foreign to them. And they're just like, we're uncomfortable for this. I started doing things like Live PD, which was a show on A&E, which was the #1 law enforcement show. I got us onto that. We did 60 Days In, which came out on A&E, but then in 2020 during COVID, Netflix put it up.
I saw I took a picture one night and sent it to you. I'm like, where'd this come from?
Well, and I didn't even know. I kept having people say, hey man, I saw your show on Netflix. And I was like, show on Netflix? What is that? And I realized I saw it on Netflix, and there I was, 60 Days In. And it was the only season of 60 Days In that they had on Netflix at the time. They've since switched it, but that's what they had on Netflix. And so we really started to brand the agency. But one of the things I said, if you look at my personal brand, I'm not in a uniform. And I told my guys from the get-go, I said, look, the uniform is not going to be part of who I am. For one, when people think of a sheriff, they think of old westerns. They think of Marshall Dillon. They think of John Wayne. That's who they think of when they think of a sheriff. And so I wanted to embody what a traditional sheriff was. And it also, there's a couple other reasons. When you're dressed like I am, I can walk into a building. Some people are immediately triggered emotionally, whether they feel anxiety, whether they immediately become cautious when they see a uniform walk in. It represents authority. And so I didn't want to have that. I wanted to be able to walk into a room and have people recognize you as the sheriff, but not have that immediate feeling that it might conjure up seeing somebody in a uniform. And the third thing was in law enforcement, as a sheriff, I'm an elected official. And whatever I do at work, I can't use that uniform, let's say, to go speak for somebody or to write a book. I can't be in uniform on the cover of a book because it creates a conflict of interest. And I knew this from the beginning. And so I said, look, I'm going to brand myself as the American sheriff. And that's what I want people to know me as. Whether I'm at work, whether I'm on the cover of a book, whether I'm speaking in front of 10,000 people in Tampa, Florida, or whether I'm on a show, all of that branding, I needed to be consistent. If you really want to build that brand, I wanted it to be consistent. And so the only way I was able to do that was not incorporate the uniform, which is why you don't hardly ever see me in the uniform. That way my brand is consistent across all platforms, whether it's a political issue, whether it's work, or whether it's a personal business matter. I don't have to change because there's nothing that is identifying for the county. And so I will tell you, because of the branding steps we took in our agency, and I know, Jesse, I'm rambling on, but because of the branding steps we took, where other agencies are really struggling hiring deputies, we just interviewed another guy that's coming from Phoenix to our agency. We've brought them from all over the country that want to come work here because we've created a brand for ourselves. People recognize me where I go because of the brand. And we're starting to expand that brand with other things like Fridays with Frank, if you follow us on Facebook or social media. And we're doing other things to really build that. But whether it's law enforcement, business, or whatever it is, you have no idea how important your brand is for being able to be consistent in marketing, also to really attract people. I mean, it's no surprise that all these big companies that are Fortune 500 companies, we recognize the brands. You can see it immediately, and you know exactly who they are and what they are. And Q-tips is a brand, but it's synonymous with Q-tips, you know.
Well, and for those people that read your book, they'll understand how you were brought up and the values that you had, and it kind of came in all. It's like a perfect storm of where you're at today and everything else. So you've stuck true to that. And I know I've been on the business development side for my entire career, Mark, since I left college, and it's easy to chase that white rabbit, right? Where it's like, oh, well, if you change this, you'll get all that, and it's like, but that's not what got me here.
That's right. That's right. If you ever play roulette, you'll learn that. Stick to the plan. If you don't, you're going to lose your money. So you got to stick to the plan, be consistent in the brand. And it took us years, but we started to really reap the rewards when the timing was right. We reaped the rewards of the branding that we were consistent on. And like you said, it is easy to chase the rabbit. And trust me, I've chased plenty of rabbits only to get tired and come back and realize I wasn't going to catch it. I may as well just get back to what I know.
That's perfectly fair. And I also wanted to go into, I know you're in law enforcement. I'm in the equipment finance industry, but I think the recruiting and retaining employees or LEOs is probably pretty much a concern that all of us have, where it's like, how do you, number one, go find the talent, and how do you provide that career path, and how do you retain them? Last thing you want to do is invest the training and effort and bringing somebody up, and then they go on to do something else. So besides
Yeah.
the branding portion of that, like, I know that's a passion of yours as well, is to go out and make, I guess, just law enforcement better, better training, better everything. So do you just want to talk about that, Sheriff?
Yeah, we're trying to create an image for law enforcement that you can do this job and hold people accountable, but be empathetic at the same time. I always tell my people, be empathetic. There's a big difference between sympathetic and empathetic. Sympathetic, you get tied up in the feelings, and that's dangerous. Empathetic gives you the ability to understand why people did something, or why what precipitated us showing up to their house, or these things. And I've tried to always encourage my people to be empathetic of what people are going through. It'll help you make sound decisions, not based on emotion. And so I think that getting the right people is really important. But here's the dichotomy we're dealing with in this day and age. I mean, we've got your old school people that are like, hey, just tell me the job and don't bother me and don't screw my paycheck up. I mean, that's one group of people. And then you have this other group of people that the new group is like, well, I don't feel like I'm doing anything, or they only want to work the 40 hours, and they're focused on quality of life, and work is really kind of just a nuisance that helps them live their quality of life. And so trying to balance how you market to these people is really difficult. I think you guys probably experienced the same
Oh
thing.
no, it's the same thing. And we asked the question. I did one of these earlier today with a gentleman who runs a captive finance organization, and it's like, the way that you lead younger people is, there's no direct, I guess, science, or there's no direct method. There's no formula for success. It's a ever evolving finger on the pulse, taking, quarterly surveys. How are we doing? And then pivoting on the fly. So,
And that can change one day to the next. Like, we have young kids that you put through the academy, they're working, and then one day they're just like, hey, I'm leaving. And you're just like, what happened? Like, it's not for me. And so you can do everything right and understand that those kids may still leave. And then you have to really, you can do the best you can to cater your company, your brand, to attract that young generation. But at the same time, don't chase the rabbit, because they will just turn on a dime and go somewhere else. And, it sucks, but we pick up the pieces and move on. The one thing that law enforcement really teaches you is that everybody is expendable. No matter how great I think I am, if I were to leave tomorrow, guess what? The sheriff's office responsible for right now won't skip a beat. They will continue to respond to calls. They will continue to submit reports. And in no time flat, they'll forget about you. And that's one of the things that you learn in law enforcement is you can be super great. They're going to keep on going when you're gone. And it's also a reminder that don't be afraid to know when it's time to say when. I think that's one of the keys to leadership. When I do a leadership training, and I know I'm kind of getting off tangent, but when I do a leadership training, I say part of leadership is understanding who needs to go, who needs to stay, but also when you should go as a leader, when you've overstayed your welcome. And I see too many leaders stay too long when they should have just ridden their horse off into the sunset, and let somebody else take the helm. And so I don't know when that is for me. Hopefully it hasn't passed, but I think that's a big part of leadership.
No, I mean, that was one of the reasons I left my previous organization. I asked for what my career path was, and they didn't give me a good answer. So, writing's on the wall. It's not easy. It's like a Band-Aid, but
yep,
you got to grow up sometime, right?
That's right. That's right. We all do. I don't know when, but we got to grow up at some point.
Fair. It's fair. The other thing I wanted to get into, Mark, was the book writing process. Like, how was that? Just explain that, because we have a lot of people that come up to Brooke and I now, and they're just like, I have an idea for a book. And it's the first part when Brooke started, we're like, oh, that's a great idea. When can we see something? And they're like, well, no, that's what we need you for. And I'm like, I can't write a book for you.
I get the same things, and I will tell you, too many people look at it on a macro level. They want to look at the whole process of doing the book. They haven't even started writing yet. Now, I do believe that everybody has a book in them. And I would just say, if you are thinking about writing a book, break it down to the micro level, not the macro level. And the micro level is just start writing. I remember watching a podcast that said, just write 250 bad words a day. And I don't mean like F you, this and that bad words. I mean like bad words in the sense
you probably knew where
that
you knew where my head was going with that. Where I'm like, well, I can do that, and that would be fun. Okay.
the thought is just write 250 words, because on the days that you're not feeling it, you'll write the 250 words. You might go back the next day and say, that sucked. Let me redo it. But the days that you may not think you're feeling it, you might be feeling it. And next thing you know, you just wrote out 3,000 words. You wrote a chapter. And so my belief is you just start writing. All of those other things will start to fall in place. And that's kind of what happened with us. My wife and I knew we had a book inside of us. We wanted, and people kept asking us if we had a book. And so we just said, look, let's write this book. And we started writing. And we knew then that started catapulting us into figuring out how we're going to publish this book once we write it. And then once we kind of wrapped our brains around that, which is what you and Brooke do, which is you help people do all the other part that is what can seem overwhelming. And then what happens is you're kind of in the mood, and people like you and Brooke will give you a deadline. And then you start to write a little bit more because you have a deadline that you have to meet. And so, but really it's just about setting aside a little bit of time every day to write 250 words, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you'll be able to write your book. And if I can, I'll just say one other thing. I just wrote another book, just finished it. I didn't even read it back through. I wrote it, and I wrote it from my heart. And I just let whatever was in my brain and in my heart and my mind just come out right into the computer. And I sent it off I just didn't have any, I don't even want to go back and read it yet. I don't know, but it's because if you go back and read it, you'll just continue to just pick it apart and you'll change it. And I think it gets away from the message you were supposed to deliver.
No, that's fair, because then it's somebody else's ideas, not yours.
Yeah.
especially when you sit there and you ask for people's advice, right? Where it's like, well, what do you think about this? And you're just like,
oh.
That's the worst.
Look,
that's the worst when friends of mine send me their books and they're just like, can you tell me what you think? And I'm like, I really don't want to, because
Yeah, that's right. And look, and here's what they need to understand. It's not Jesse's book to write. It's their book to write. And then the editors will clean it up. And they might change a few things the way you say it. Maybe they tell you to add a little bit more details to a story. But, a lot of it's just going to be cleaning it up. And I think that's good, because then it doesn't take away from the message that you wanted to deliver. Now, whether people want to read your book is a whole different thing. But writing it might just be for your posterity. It might, be a New York Times bestseller. But I think it's important that you tell those stories. You look back at the whole history of man, and the things that we've been able to accomplish are only possible because certain people wrote what they achieved down. They wrote their experiences down. They wrote their feelings down. And those records have translated into our society has been able to progress over time to the point where we have all the technology and things that we have, and we're going to be even better in 50 years from now. All that was because of books, because people wrote things down and they wrote their achievements down. And so, yeah, I mean, look, if you don't write it, nobody's going to ever know it.
No, it's fair enough. I mean, what someone turned me on to a book, The Splendid and the Vile. It's about a World War II book, and it's all about the diary writings of all these people. And if people didn't write in a simple diary, you wouldn't have known their perspective. It's almost like they wouldn't have existed.
I remember watching a video, and this is kind of goes to this point. I remember watching this video, and it was a bird, and the bird had a little baby bird, but the bird, what it would do is it would watch people throw bread into the water, and then it would watch the fish come and eat the bread. So then the bird started going and grabbing the bread. And you were wondering what the bird was doing, because the bird would walk with the bread and wasn't eating the bread. The bird would walk around to the other side of the lake and drop the bread in the water. And when the fish would come out, it would grab the fish and eat the fish. But what I remember that show saying is, the bird has no ability to teach its offspring what it had learned. We as humans have the ability to teach our offspring what we've learned, and they eat more fish because of it. They eat the bread because of it. And it was weird to see that knowledge that bird had was going to die with that bird, and it was up to their birds to figure it out for themselves at that point. And so I just thought it was interesting that, and that's why I think that it's important everybody write their experiences, because we don't have to go and figure out how to catch fish after that.
So is that a new political meme we could have? Teach a bird to fish.
Yeah, that's right. Teach a bird to fish.
We'll leave it at that.
Oh, we got a lot of teaching to do.
Yeah, fair enough. So Sherrif, I ask everyone that I have on this show to give a little fun fact about themselves. So anything you would like to share with my audience, like what does Sherrif Lamb like to do outside of your travel, being on duty? Anything you'd like to share, sir?
I've been a huge MMA fan my whole life, which also helped me when I became a cop. I wasn't adverse to physical contact. So that was a good fit for me. But I don't get into it as much anymore. I'll be honest with you, I'm addicted to work. I like to work and achieve. What I've realized over time is that I only have so much time. And so I've really it's not that I do work, it's just that I'm doing things that I'm passionate about, whether it's building, going out and showing people the profession that I love and honor, which is the law enforcement, whether it's building my personal brand, whether it's making this agency the best that it can be. I work tirelessly at that, but I love cruises. That's my getaway. I tell people all the time, they're like, how can you go sit on a cruise ship and do nothing, and when you do so much during the week? I said, because I'm 100%er. I go 100% at work, and when I vacation, I go 100%. And so I can sit on that pool deck and stare and do nothing and eat. And I love that about the cruises, and my phone doesn't work. So I guess that's the fun fact about me, is that I love cruises. I particularly love the Caribbean. I was born and raised in Hawaii, so any body of water, I'm good to go with. Except California, the water's too cold.
That's fair. And one thing I also want to ask you, public speaking. Have you always been a really good public speaker? Are you ever nervous before you walk out there in some of these big audiences, or do you relish that adrenaline and turn the nervousness into excitement?
That's a great question. And I've always wanted to be a public speaker. I remember meeting a guy when I was in my early 20s, and I said, hey, I really want to be a public speaker. And he's like, what are you going to speak about? I had done nothing in my life, and I never forgot that. And so as I went through life, especially when I became a cop, I started really just trying to develop, what is it that I would speak about if I ever had an opportunity to speak? And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of speaking as a sheriff, but it wasn't until, honestly, that I wrote this book. As soon as I wrote this book, it opened the door to the paid speaking events. And I relish in it. I will be honest with you, I don't get nervous. I get a little bit ultra focused to make sure, because I memorize all my quotes. I share a lot of quotes when I speak. I memorize scriptures. And my only I guess nervousness would be in making sure that I remember to hit all my quotes right, and to deliver my message right. I don't prepare speeches. I deliver from the heart. And so I memorize a ton of stuff. And then while I'm speaking, I just try to hit those. I try to share something. And so I have to memorize a lot of stuff. And it's just being nervous to make sure. But there's nothing like walking out on the stage with 10,000 people, standing there cheering, It's exhilarating and I love it. I don't get nervous. I feed off the energy. And so, yeah, it's something I really enjoy doing.
No, I mean, that's a special talent. And I've seen you give speeches in front of big crowds too. And it's kind of one of those things for me. It's like, I know I have it, but it's like the anticipation leading up to it that just kind of like, stop it, man. Stop it. You got this. Just stop it. But
Yeah, and that's how most people are. Look, I feel blessed that I can really get out there and, my brain does something where it kind of starts to shut out. My wife knows, hey, try to keep people away from me. Don't talk to me, because really what I'm doing is trying to focus so that when I go out, I deliver the message that those people paid to come and hear. And so that's really what I'm super focused on, is just trying to make sure that I give them the best I have that day. But it's not nervousness to go out and speak in front of all the people.
well, there might be some training you'll have to give me so I can get that hyper focus just to calm down.
We'll work on it. You got it,
All right.
though. All it is just knowing your craft, what you do.
I know, but I think we're all just hypercritical of ourselves, and it's that thing we just have to stop it. Just stop it. But, yeah.
That is one thing that I've really had to learn, because I'm like other people. I'd hear my voice on recording or TV and I'd be like, oh, I sound like an idiot. And I had to really get comfortable with that. And just how you look, your presentation, and I'm not where I would not, I'd love to have a six pack and look like all these other guys. Guess what? I don't have enough time to spend in the gym to do that. And I'm not committed enough to eat the foods that you need to eat, because I like to go out and enjoy life at the same time. And
Yeah.
so I think when you start to really be comfortable with yourself, those people that you walk on stage, they see your confidence in your own self and just who you are, and immediately they're attracted to it. Despite your flaws that you think you have, they're attracted to you because you're confident about who you are. And I've had to learn how to develop that, really just hone that in and say, this is who I am. I hope you like it. And if you don't, I'm sorry.
Oh well. Less
Not
of
really
me,
sorry, but
less of me, more of you. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Sheriff Lamb, I really appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you for being a guest on our 100th episode. Excited to have you and for you to share your perspective. And look forward to, when you get back in town, let's catch up.
Let's do it. My pleasure, Jesse. Thanks for having me. And thank you guys for keeping the finance equipment moving. I appreciate it. Because I try to run, I still have my businesses on the side, which I need that. So.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Jesse. God bless.
Okay.